Hey guys, today we are painting up this pumpkin right here. And I painted this on Crescent illustration board. We'll start with that. And the Crescent illustration board, I do not recommend. As a matter of fact, my low tack masking actually pulled the top layer off when I pulled this back off on the outer edge, which is not a good thing. And I painted this with the primary no-name airbrush paint set. So just red, yellow, blue, black, and white. I have a lot of paints, and I know a lot of times people think they need a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to do this just with primers, show you guys you really don't need a lot of stuff. I used one airbrush. I used my Iwata Eclipse. I use these 5 paints, which are very economical. Painted this up, and yeah, you can find this reference on Pixabay. If you look up pumpkin, I made some changes to it. I made it a little bit darker, a little more brooding, but the basic painting is the same. So let's get to work, and I'll talk to you guys when we get done.
Clearly you can see that I have used a piece of parchment paper here and I'm just covering up the pumpkin area so I don't get too much overspray in there. I will get a little bit accidentally on the right hand side, but it's not that big a deal. So we are working with just a gray that has just a little bit of orange added to it to create that look. And then what I'm going to do is add some yellow to that gray to make that mossy green that you see there. Now we're going to come back with a little bit of orange. Now these colors in the background are going to be covered up with smoke, so we're not really worried about them being perfect. We just want to have something in there for the smoke to come up in front of and give us a little bit of background colors. You'll see I'm blasting in. Now I'm working with black and just reduced black. That's it, and creating some of that color there, and you see how I let that float up into the bottom of the pumpkin over there because that color is going to be very, very, very dark in that bottom corner. So I just went ahead and put it up there so that we can work down to it and I don't have to come back to where those logs are. Again, I'm going to do the same thing over here on this side, and this has just a little bit of orange mixed with the black. So what I've done is made a really, really deep brown, and it mostly looks gray. And we're just going to come in here, we spray, we're going to create that checkered pattern where it looks like a cut log. And then we're going to come back and we're going to pull things out with an electric eraser. We're working on a illustration board surface here, one that will not take a blade, but it does do okay with erasing. So I'm using the electric eraser, which I don't use a lot of, but you know, it can be handy at times. Going to work this log over here, and then I'm going to work the other log, and it's going to be much the same. So we're going to use a little bit of texture stencils to create some of those checking patterns that we got inside the wood. It just gives it a little bit of rough dimension. As you'll see, I'm working, so I'm not just spraying in there, I'm putting that is kind of a figure eight, little tiny figure eight motion, and blending out from there a little bit. So I want that rough look so that it looks like you're looking into that bark piece. And using a couple of dot stencils, texture stencils. Of course, I have a video on how you make your own if you don't have any of them. It's not a big deal. You can get by without using them, but it is very handy. And you'll notice I'm working in that circular motion to create that ring look. And of course, I'm going to come back here and do a little bit of erasing. It's important to understand that this area is up in the foreground, but it's still not going to be the main focus. So if we're not perfect, it's not a big deal. Again, my plan was not to be perfect with this painting in the first place. I painted it pretty quickly. I just think it's a really cool little project. Get something out here for Halloween, something that, you know, I can be happy with. And that's exactly what we got there. But you'll see I create that check pattern using those texture stencils. And then you'll see how I'm working in that ring pattern. Also, if you don't feel like you can freehand those in like that, take a piece of paper and broken piece of paper, torn piece of paper, whatever, and you can create those rings like that. And then I'm going to come back across again with an eraser and cut that back out. Once we create all those little rings in there, I will come back and glaze over with my black paint to kind of tone that in, to knock it back in, take just a little bit of that too much harshness from the eraser out of the picture. I made that peach color with 1 drop of red, about 3 drops of yellow, 1 less than a drop of blue, and 7 or 8 drops of white paint to create that peachy color you see right there. And that is going to be the base color that we're going to work with inside the mouth. And that probably seems like it's too dark when I lay it in here, but you'll find later in the picture that it actually is too light. It's not even dark enough. So that's not going to be a problem. If you're too light, you can always correct things. So if you're going to err, always err on the side of being a little bit too light, because it's very, very easy to darken and not so easy to lighten when it comes to airbrushing. And so I'm working just a figure-8 motion. I'm just keeping and creating a lot of texture in there. A lot of this is going to get covered with smoke later, so it doesn't really matter. But we want to have some texture in there. Now, if you notice I'm not coming all the way back down to my pencil lines on the very bottom. And the reason why is that is going to be a section where you can see, because of the angle that you're looking in, you can see inside the mouth and you can see inside the eyes. Without a little bit of that inside edge showing, it's going to look wrong. You'll see it later in the picture. It'll make sense. So I added just a little bit of red to that same color that I was using, and we put some color in the background for the pumpkin face, and that is going to be my base layer color. In other words, when I come back pulling out highlights, I'm most likely going to come back to that instead of coming all the way back to white. I wanted a little broodier feel than what the reference created, so I'm going to be a little bit darker than the original reference painting and get the look that I want. Now I added a little bit more blue to that orangish mix and created a little bit lighter, darker brown, as you can see. And we're going to come in here and shade a little bit of stuff in there. And those things are important. Also, I missed it, but I did take some almost pure yellow and paint it around the mouth. And you'll see later where that becomes the important part. That is like the inside behind the outer dark orange layer in the pumpkin, you know, that little meat section of the pumpkin that would be showing because you're looking inside of it. And here you can see me using an eraser to define that inside edge of the pumpkin there. Now I've taken red and a significant amount of yellow, made a transparent orange, added a tiny hint of blue, like I dipped the tip of a toothpick into some blue paint and dipped it into that just to give it a little bit of dullness from where, you know, so that it wasn't too bright. And so as I'm working here and filling this background color, one, you'll see me using this torn piece of paper, and that is going to create a nice sharp delineation and give me that bright sharp line that between each pumpkin, I don't know what you call those, you know, the lower part inside. I have no idea what those are actually called. So to create those nice sharp lines, then of course it's going to shadow out from there and you're going to have highlights. So I will create the line and then I'll create a gentle blend of highlight there. Now we're going to work in multiple layers. So the whole time I'm working with this, I'm also working a lot of that figure-8 shaky hand kind of stuff to create a lot of textures. As you can see over here, I'm doing that, laying in a whole lot of that just base texture layer. We got a lot more color coming over here, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Most of this will just get buried. Most of that texture will just get buried. You won't hardly see it, but your eye will pick it up. You'll also see me use multiple, you know, different textures. So not only will I erase highlights out, but you'll also see me grab my dot stencil and just splash it in there. Later, you're going to see me as I get into darker colors, I'm going to use a stippling. So what I will do is I'll turn my airbrush pressure down until it just creates a stippled effect from the airbrush and spray on top of that as I'm coloring. And so you'll see that it's going to be a very, very light stipple textures, but it'll be a little hard to see on the camera, but it is there. You'll be able to see it. I slowed it down when I get to that point. So you can see here where I'm using the dot stencil, creating a lot of textures and pulling out textures with the eraser. Of course, your high spots are where your, you know, highlights are going to be. So, you know, we're just going to work in that way. And like I said, I don't want my highlights to be super, super crisp. So I'm not going to go too crazy with that. I want this to have a little darker feel, a little grittier feel, so the pumpkin looks a little worn, not like brand new right out of the store. So we added just a little bit of red to that original lighter orange, and that gives it just a little bit darker. And I'm not going to use a lot of that color, but we're going to come in here and touch a few spots and continue just working quickly, adding textures as we go. As I bring a layer over there, I'm going to pull back out those textures with the eraser using a pencil eraser and using other erasers. Now I've added a little bit more blue to that color and made a much darker brown. Now that's the spot where you can see me spraying the stippling effect on there that's barely visible. So now we've added a little bit of blue, so we're a little bit more of a violetish tone, but it's still in that brown range. So all we've got in there is red, yellow, and blue to mix to the point that we get that tone that I'm looking for. So as you'll see, I'm doing a lot of shaky hand stuff, and then I'm going to continue to blend out. So notice we're just carving out our dimension, just like, we got a carved pumpkin, so we're going to carve out our dimension with our airbrush. So we'll blend in and shade in. We'll use a little bit of shading on the left-hand side, just like we were shading a sphere, but we have to account for each one of those humps. Remember, we talked about shapes. We've talked about shapes many times and how each one of those shapes are just a process. They're the building blocks. So you're going to just work within shapes within the sphere. So I'm going to keep on building my dimension, and I'm doing a lot of this, a lot of these cracks and stuff I'm going to work in here are going to be done freehand. You just don't feel like you have to. Don't ever feel like you have to do something that way. I did that because I'm just kind of hurrying through this. I've been doing this a while. I should stress that when you're beginner or not quite confident in your abilities, you should never rush your way through something just to get it done. Speed will come in time, and only you can decide how much you want to leave out or how much you want to change a picture. If you don't want it to be perfect, then that's fine, but don't let it be not perfect because you feel you can't get there and you're rushing. If you are learning, you should strive to get it as close to perfection as possible, and only start once you've built up some skills and built up a lot of confidence. Then you can start deciding what you want to throw away or what you want to keep. Now, to get this darkest color here, I have mixed black into my original color. That's not spraying black on top. That's a totally different effect. So what I wind up with is a very warm, dark brown color. If you were just to spray the black over the top of this, even though it's transparent, it will not give the same effect than mixing black with your orange or mixing black with your reds. So I've mixed more red in there, and I've mixed the black with that to get that darkest color. And right now it looks like it's way, way too dark. But as we continue to blend in and carve that out from the right-hand side, you'll see how that's come together to the right texture or the right color that we want to work there. And notice I'm constantly working with like the dot stencil. You can make your own. I have videos about how to do that, or you can buy them, but they are very handy tools to have. Just don't make them a complete crutch. Now I'm removing the masking that I put in because I masked out around the eyes and the mouth and the nose. I forgot to mention that. And as you see how light that is. So what I'm doing is mixed up some more brown, which was, orange mixed with, which I made my orange from red and yellow. And then we mix that with some blue. And we're going to mix that brown in there. And we're going to put a little bit more of that color inside the mouth. We're carving out. Notice how I'm going to come in off the top and create that shading. Now, of course, I've got smoke coming over here, so I don't have to be perfect with things. So then I cleaned everything out, and I'm going to put some white in there, and we're going to reduce that down, and we're going to use some shaky hand stuff there for gentle smoke. Now, I might have gone a little bit too far with this. We'll lighten that up. But right here in this point, make sure you get that smoke coming from the inside and not from the outside of the pumpkin. There's a huge difference there.
All right, guys, that's going to be a wrap for today. I'm Bill Kennedy with the Airspace, if you don't know who I am, and this is what we painted today. Hopefully you got a little something out of it. If you did, hey, hit the subscribe button, and, you know, maybe throw me some likes, leave some comments down below, ask me questions, all that good stuff. I'll leave you guys links for the paint I used in this video and for the electric eraser I used if you're interested in what I'm using, and maybe the airbrush I use too. But that's going to be a wrap for today. I guess that's it. Y'all have a great day.